Yeah, good day. Welcome to Mktg 305, Consumer Behavior. Today our focus is on Section 9, and we'll be talking about consumer attitude formation and change. As individual consumers, we have attitude towards virtually everything in the marketplace. And we are interested in this because consumer attitude influences purchase and consumption-related decision-making, just like we discussed under perception. So attitude simply measures the extent to which consumers like or dislike various marketing stimuli. When we put offerings out there, we expect to elicit some favorable responses. But based on several factors, consumers form attitude, and it impacts on their decision-making process. Hence, as marketers, we need to be able to gauge or measure consumer attitude in order to be competitive, so to speak. We'll define consumer attitude. We'll look at the importance of consumer attitude to marketers, and then how consumers form attitudes, and of course, strategies for changing attitudes. Again, I'll direct you to further reading if need be. By the end of the session, there are some references there for further reading. As consumers, you know that, or you come to appreciate that each of us has a vast number of attitudes towards stimuli such as products, services, advertisements, political parties, politicians, the internet, supermarkets, retailers, and so on, in relation to whether we like or dislike something. Somebody will say, I like this political party, I like their manifesto, I don't like this parliamentarian, I don't like the way this person dresses and all. It all has to do with consumer attitude. So in simple terms, whenever we are being asked whether we like or dislike something, in effect, we are being asked to express our attitude. So let's go on and see. Before we even define consumer attitude, let's look at the importance of understanding consumer attitude from a marketing perspective. We are saying that consumer attitude is important, or consumer attitude studies is important because it has what I call the predictability value. Once we do research about consumer attitude as to whether they like or dislike an already existing product or a new product, we are better placed to predict how they are likely to act in the marketplace. And all these things are important because of its implication for competition, its implication for company resource deployment, what have you. Studying consumer attitude is also important because it has what we call the motivational value. Through research, we are able to know what will propel or what will be responsible for a particular behavior. In other words, consumers' attitude are in relation to need satisfaction. So I'm saying that a strongly held attitude can propel a person towards a particular behavior. When we study consumer attitude, we are able to tell the strength of the attitude the consumers have. Typically, we may use Likert scale and so on. So I like this product very well. I like it somehow and all that. So based on these studies, we are able to tell who is likely to behave in a particular way in relation to a given marketing offer or those of competition. Consumer attitude is also important because it also has explanatory value. Apart from predictability and also telling us something about motivational value, a good study, attitudinal studies, will help us explain why consumers will act in a particular way, and so on and so forth. So it's useful in terms of predictability, value, motivational value, and explanatory value. We are able to explain why a brand failed or why a brand will fail. based on attitude studies. Attitudes are not directly observable, but must be inferred from what people say or what they do. When I say attitude, it's not like a church building or a mobile phone where I pick and all that. That's why we are discussing it under the psychological influences on consumer behavior. It's not something observable and all that. But for us to be able to measure or to gauge consumer attitude, there are two things that we can do. We may measure or gauge consumer attitude through questioning. When I say questioning, various research tools can be used, survey, interview, and all that. We can ask specific questions in relation to whether consumers like or dislike an object of interest. Apart from questioning, we can also measure or gauge consumer attitude by making inferences from behavior. In other words, based on how people act in a given purchase and consumption related situation, we are able to draw some kind of conclusions or make some inferences as to whether the person like or dislike an object of interest. For instance, if Kofi as a consumer consistently buys a particular brand, this same Kofi consistently recommends the brand to friends. Based on this, it's only reasonable for us to conclude that Kofi has a positive attitude towards the brand in question. Again, we can also infer that Kofi possesses a positive attitude towards that brand based on these examples. Now, an attempt at defining attitude. I know it's every day we hear attitude and all that, but let's look at this definition. Attitude is a learned predisposition to behave. In other words, attitude is a learned predisposition to act in a consistently favorable or unfavorable manner with respect to a given object. In other words, we can only hold attitude towards something or an object of interest. We don't hold attitude in isolation. It has to be in relation to a political party, in relation to an advertisement, in relation to a price being quoted, in relation to salespeople, in relation to packaging, and so on and so forth. So attitude is in relation to a given object. So we measure whether somebody likes or dislikes something. So that's something, or offering is the object we are talking of. In summary, we can say that we can conceptualize it as a summary evaluation of an object. In other words, the object of interest, we are trying to gauge or find out from the consumer the extent of like or dislike that they have for the attitude object or offering. I've already explained what I mean by attitude object, and I'm also saying that attitudes are learned. In other words, attitudes are acquired through learning. And we learn experientially, by direct experience. We can also learn vicariously, and so on. So attitude is learned. That's why learning is important. We can teach consumers to develop certain attitudes towards our offering. And when we are talking about attitude, it's important that we also bring the element of consistency. A person should have demonstrated repeatedly a particular behavior for us to properly draw some conclusions on that attitude. So we are saying that attitude should have, so we are saying that consistently we need to see somebody doing something over a period of time. So proper attitudinal studies should not just end based on do you like this and all that. It's useful. But if you ask how often do you recommend this brand, will you always recommend this brand and so on, it's to be a better measure than just a one-off kind of questioning. So consistency in attitude, in attitudinal measurement is important. Though in the definition there was nothing like situation, but we can't conceptualize attitude without looking at the situation, because behavior must necessarily occur within a given situation. And when we look at the way we've defined attitude, we are saying it's a learned predisposition. We are not saying that attitude is synonymous to behavior. In other words, attitude is not the same as behavior. But we've acquired certain knowledge about the attitude object, which predisposes us to act. We are likely to do things in a particular way, but it doesn't mean we will necessarily do that. So attitude may lead to behavioral intentions, but not necessarily actual intention in the marketplace. Because it's possible to ask, when you ask a group of guys, do you like Milo? Do you know about, oh, Milo is nutritious. I like Milo and all that. Based on that, it gives an idea that they have positive attitude. They've learned certain things about Milo. Maybe they've enjoyed it before, or they heard people comment about it, or they've seen positive, good adverts about that. But when you ask them as to whether you take it for breakfast, chances are they'll say, well, I will not take this for breakfast. And you should be interested in knowing why. If attitude is synonymous to behavior, the fact that he says he likes that should mean that in the morning, when he has to take breakfast, he's likely going to take Milo. But that is not how it works. That's why I say attitude is a summary evaluation that predisposes us to act in a particular way, but it's not the same as behavior. But notwithstanding this, it's important that we gauge consumer attitude, because there can be a relationship between attitude and behavior. Though at best, attitude leads to purchase intention, which can go on to lead to positive behavior. Positive attitude can lead to actual purchase, but not always. That's why we say attitude is not synonymous to behavior, but it's a predisposition to act. And it's important that as marketers, we need to measure the attitude of our target market in relation to the attitude object or our market offering. And situation is also important, because situation determines what actually the way we act in the marketplace. A person who consistently buys a particular brand of drink, alcoholic beverage, based on which we can say that he has a positive attitude. But that same person may be in the company of other people he respects and all that, and end up rejecting a brand that he has bought consistently, just maybe by sheer pressure or trying to belong, because need to belong is also a human need. So in this case, you realize that attitude may be different from actual behavior, or maybe there's a competing offering, and as individuals we may have need for variety or need for uniqueness and all that. So the person may go contrary to his attitude. We know that this person buys this particular drink anytime we go out, but there's a competing offer, or he's in the company of other friends he wants to please, or maybe the price has been increased, or there's no money, and so on and so forth. Or mood, he's in a particular mood and needs something different. So although attitude studies is important, we need to always look at the situation in which attitude manifests or occur if we need to understand consumer attitude. Okay, so like I've explained, under here, under this slide, you see examples of attitude objects. Attitude, anything that can elicit our attention. I'm also saying that in attitudinal study, or in studying consumer attitude, it is important that we clearly define the attitude object, because there's something we call multi-attribute model. In other words, consumers make evaluation about brands or objects based on multiple attributes. So it's possible for somebody to say, I don't like sports. But when you probe further, you say, oh, I like tennis. So in attitudinal study, all we are saying that it's important that we clearly define the attitude object. It's useful if you, as a political campaign strategist, if you ask potential electors whether they like a political candidate, useful question, generic. You ask them, they say, we like candidate A, or we don't like candidate A. Useful. But in attitudinal studies, we need to go beyond that. Because why do they like the person? Do they like him because of his personality? Do they like him because of his tribe? Do they like him because of the promises he has made? Do they like him because of his eloquence? These are multi-attribute model we are talking about. We make the evaluations about brands based on multiple attributes. So we need to clearly define, based on which we can come out with the right strategies. So in attitudinal study, we need to differentiate between the generic concept and the specific. Because it's possible for somebody to say, I like Mercedes-Benz, and you can't go on to conclude that all things being equal, he'll go on to purchase Mercedes-Benz. But if you probe further, chances are that I like Mercedes-Benz, but I don't like A, B, C, D about the brand, and so on. That's why you need to clearly define the attitude object. We're also saying attitudes are learned, like I said, through experiential learning. Learning can also take place by way of word of mouth, and marketers need to be concerned about word of mouth because it could be negative, it could be positive. Learning can take place via the internet. You should be concerned about the kind of information your target audience or customers are getting via the internet and all that. And various forms of direct marketing are all sources by which consumers learn. Of course, learning can also take place vicariously. I've explained that they are learned predispositions, therefore not synonymous to behavior. And then the issue of consistency also important. Talking about situation, we've explained that one too, but normally we expect consumer behavior to correspond with their attitude, but that is not always the case. That is why we need to look at, do scenario building, look at all the possible situations that the consumer may find himself in when it comes to the actual purchase and consumption related decision, so that we can strategize accordingly. We should be thinking of what are the strategies of attitude change. As marketers, when we position products, we want our target market to view our offerings positively. When they view it positively, there's commonality of idea or thought. Effective communication would have taken place. But sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes it has to do with the attitude. When consumers have positive attitude towards our brand, prudent marketers will want to entrench that positioning because there's a relationship between attitude and behavior. But where they have negative attitude towards our brand, we want to, because we say one of the importance of attitudinal study is the explanatory value. We want to be able to know why or the source of this negative attitude so that we can come out with the right strategies. So when the attitude is positive, we want to entrench, we want to know and entrench that positioning. When it's negative, we want to know the reasons, and then we want to change it. Because in today's competitive marketplace, we cannot afford to practice the leaky bucket approach because consumers are faced with several alternatives. So it's about knowing consumer attitude and strategizing accordingly. But it's important to know that strongly held consumer attitude may be difficult to change. Often, what marketers do, they rather change the attitude object instead of trying to change the attitude of the consumer. Because consumers have attitude, consumer attitude is measured in relation to a given object. So when they have some attitude, is that positive or negative, or when they have negative attitude, we need to work on the attitude object because that's the source of the attitude they hold. So often marketers need to focus on the attitude object. A political candidate who is not perceived in a positive light or that electorates have negative attitude, through attitudinal study, we get to know why this negative attitude. We don't work by trying to persuade the target market that this is a good candidate, vote for him. That is also part of the strategy. But once they hold that attitude, we need to know the source of the attitude and work on that. If he doesn't talk well, which is the source of their negative attitude, then we need to work on the candidate to begin to talk well. If he doesn't dress well, and that is why the electorates don't like him, we need to work on that. It's not just focusing on the attitude itself, which is a psychological concept I don't like, and then you want to force the target market to like an object. So often, so in the pursuance of attitude change strategies, in trying to change consumer attitude, marketers often, that's what I've put in, often is in red, marketers often alter the product to conform to consumer attitude. So mostly we work on the product to conform. But of course, if the source of the attitude is unfounded, through marketing communication, we can elicit, we can persuade consumers to also change their attitude with regards to the attitude object. The specific strategies, one, we can, in terms of attitude change strategies, we can change what we call the basic motivational value. When we look at, when I explained the importance of consumer attitude, I said attitude has motivational value. Consumers buy goods and services because they want to satisfy a need. And when we discuss motivation, we discuss it in relation to need, motives, and goals. We buy goods and services because we want to satisfy a need. So one way of changing consumer attitude is to work on the motivational functions, whether the product is meeting the needs it promises to meet, where we need to emphasize a particular aspect or particular need that the brand or the product can help satisfy, where we need to emphasize that we can do that. So when we say we need to change the basic motivational function with regards to the attitude object. What need would this brand satisfy? Is it basic physiological needs or biogenic needs? Is it need for safety? Is it need for belonging? Or is it self-esteem, ego, or self-actualization? It's possible consumers have negative attitude because we've not succeeded in positioning the brand in terms of the needs is satisfied. So if that is the case, we can emphasize the various needs that the brand can satisfy. Or where we need to, we can also highlight certain needs the brand can satisfy that was not highlighted in previous marketing communication. So we can change the basic motivational value to bring about attitudinal change. Two, we can also change consumer attitude by associating the product with an admired group. This also works like we discussed in the classical conditioning model kind of thing. Because we say consumers learn by means of association. So we can pair our brand or object or stimulus with an admired group, event, personalities, and all that. That's how come sometimes we choose certain personalities to serve as ambassadors or spokespersons, or we associate certain brands with certain important events that are useful to the target market, and so on and so forth. It's not for nothing. I mean, these private universities and all that, when they start, they struggle with issue of credibility. Hence, they do some kind of association where they say, we are associated with the University of Ghana, we are associated with the University of Cape Coast, or London School of Economics, that kind of thing. Because consumers learn by association. If you are affiliated to this brand, then we expect some minimum level of quality from the brand. So apart from motivational, changing the motivational function, we can also change consumer attitude through products by associating the product with an admired group or event. In this classical conditioning, there should be what we call conjugacy. There should be some kind of homogeneity in terms of, there should be kind of conjugacy. In other words, the stimulus being paired should have something to do with the brand. There should be believability, people should believe, and all that. Let's look at the third point. We can resolve two conflicting attitudes. For the same, because I talk of multi-attribute model, which says that consumers' evaluation of brands are based on multiple attributes. And as marketers, we need to know the relative importance of the various skills or features that consumers use in evaluating brands. It's possible for a consumer to have two conflicting attitudes about the same attitude object. In other words, he likes certain things about a brand and dislikes certain things. It's possible for us to prove that, if where possible, we need to prove to the target market that the source of the negative attitude they have is rather a positive attitude. For instance, in the auto market, somebody can have a negative attitude towards a brand because of maybe pricing or because of unavailability of parts, yet he has positive attitudes based on certain dimensions. If we can persuade or can make this target market or these consumers become aware that the fact that there are not many dealers, the fact that the brand is durable, it doesn't break down easily. So you may not even have the need for replacement and so on and so forth. So your source of negative attribute is really unwarranted. In other words, where there are conflicting source of attitudes, we can change that by making them aware. So in other words, marketers can emphasize the benefits that accrue from such perceived sources of negative perceptions. Somebody can say this drug is too bitter and all that. But if we can prove that it's in the bitterness that one gets relief and all that, would have succeeded in changing attitude, which the negative attitude which is based on bitterness of the drug. We can also change beliefs about competitors' brand. The attitude consumers have about brand is also partly because of the knowledge they have of the competition or the marketplace. So sometimes where it's justifiable, we can prove to consumers that we are better on certain features vis-a-vis competition. And that can change consumer attitude towards our brand. But this thing has to be done with care because of ethical issues and all that. This is very common in the telecom industry, where there's stiff competition. In doing this, marketers may use very subtle or maybe explicit about the source of their competitive advantages. Another strategy for attitude change here is that we can change the relative evaluation of attributes, similar to the multi-attribute model. If we can prove, we can teach consumers of all the attributes for evaluating brands or products, or a product in a given category. If we can prove, we can teach them, or we can help them appreciate the most important evaluation criteria. In the process, we can help change consumer attitude. Because marketers have the duty to educate consumers in terms of the importance of certain dimensions of brands or attributes and so on and so forth. It's also possible to change consumer attitude by changing brand beliefs. When consumers acquire knowledge over time, they form certain beliefs about certain brands, that possession or acquisition of brand A will lead to these benefits and all that. Where we can prove that, well, we know this is the source of the negative attitude, we can change these beliefs about brands. And we are saying that this is a cognitive-oriented strategy which focuses on changing beliefs or perception about a given brand. I mean, consumers have acquired knowledge, some through word of mouth, from competing ad and all that. Some could be founded, some may not be founded and all that. But eventually it leads to certain brand beliefs. So research needs to unearth some of these beliefs about brands and, of course, about competition, so that where possible, where we can justify, we can help consumers to unlearn the negative attitudes they have about our brands. It's also possible to change consumer attitude by adding or eliminating an attribute. You know, consumers take decisions based on several attributes. Some, they may be satisfied with several of the dimensions or the attributes, but just one aspect may be that strong and may be the source of their negative attribute. So from research, if we are able to identify that source, we may add an attribute that hitherto we overlooked or we didn't think was important. We may add that attribute to the object or the brand in question. The opposite situation too is true, where the source of the negative attribute is as a result of a dimension which is not favorable to the target market. We may have to eliminate that dimension for consumers to develop negative attitude towards our brand. The lotions that our ladies buy and all that. With time, as studies go on, you get to realize that some lotions have negative impact on the skin of our ladies and all that. When this becomes a major source of decision making, prudent marketers will make conscious effort to eliminate that chemical or that ingredient that is responsible for that negative impact on the skin, and thereby going about communicating to the target audience that the brand is now without these ingredients, or the brand, this ingredient or this dimension has been added to the brand, all in the quest to change negative attitude to a positive attitude. We can also change what we call the overall brand ratings. In a competitive environment, we may compete based on several things. I mean, sometimes the first to introduce to the market can be a source of competitive advantage. Sometimes you can cash in or capitalize on the fact that you've been in existence for a very long time, or the fact that you can even use your target market as a source of competitive advantage. So I'm saying that this is also a cognitive-oriented strategy, which typically aims at altering the individual consumers' the global or overall assessment of the brand directly, without attempting to improve or change the evaluation of any single brand attribute. In this kind of strategy, this cognitive-oriented strategy, we want to talk generally and say we are the best car in the market, we are the best, we are the leading telecom, we are the biggest brand, we are the first in the market and all. All these generic claims can also change consumer attitude. Yeah, I think I'll end here. You may look at the discussion question. You may want to do it in groups just to help you appreciate the concept that we've just discussed. These are your references. Thank you.